Welcome in to Greenville Grit, Greenville residents in touch on 103.7 WTIB. This is the local show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Ribeyes, Kid Construction, and Greenville Toyota. Now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Welcome to the Greenville Grit. My name is Michael Overton. My normal co-host, Terry Williams. You're definitely not Terry Williams today. She is homesick and couldn't be here, but Dennis Mitchell is usually on this side of me. I've got Chancellor Steve Ballard as our special guest today. Chancellor, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
We're going to talk quite a bit about East Carolina, our present state, where we're going in the future, and some of the exciting things going on at our great university. But before we do it, we always have to thank the sponsors that allowed the show to come on. We got to thank Greenville Toyota. If you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or a new used car, go see Craig Ghost and the Greenville Toyota team. You can reach them at 321-3000 on the web at greenvilletoyota.com or in person across from Fresh Market in Greenville. We got to thank Ribeyes Steakhouse. Dennis, you and I always talk about ribeyes.
Love ribeyes.
Yes, sir. At the corner of Fire Tower and Arlington Boulevard, also a location in Williamston. If you mention the Greenville Grit, you get a surprise, and I'm not sure what it is. They change it often. But check them out. Great salad bar, great steaks, great pork chops, great chicken.
Steaks in Greenville, I say.
Yes, sir. Very, very, and a great atmosphere. So try them out. Also, Kid Construction Group. Bill Kidd is a good friend of mine. You can visit him on the web at kcgbuildgreen.com. They are a green builder. He is a Parade of Homes winner, and if you're looking for a new construction or a rehab, please look him up. Also, the Overton Group, real estate professionals serving all of eastern North Carolina, from Raleigh to the coast in commercial real estate leasing and sales, business brokerage, property management on both the commercial and residential side, as well as Michelle Connors, wife of Jeff Connors, our strength coach at ECU. She heads up our residential real estate team. So look us up on the web at ovtgroup.com. We were going to take a 2-minute commercial break. We're going to come back and start talking with Chancellor Ballard. Be back in 2. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. Again, I am with my co-host today, Dennis Mitchell. Terry Williams is out sick, couldn't be here, but we have a special guest, Chancellor Steve Ballard. Dr. Ballard, thank you for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.
For those that don't know you, you are the Chancellor of East Carolina University. Been here 15?
Nope, my 11th year.
11th,
11th
okay.
year.
Well, I knew it had been a while. I knew it
Seems
was
like a
after
long time.
After I graduated in 96. From there, and you came, what, in
I was
around
elected
2000?
about this time in 2004, and I started in May of 2004.
Okay, wow. And you graduated when?
2004.
Okay. You just said at break your first commencement address was given by his first commencement address.
I may have been, my first one may have been the December, so probably there was somebody else gave it in the spring of 04.
I remember I was there, and I remember you going through, you gave, I think, 8 characteristics of leadership or principles of leadership.
That was mine, yeah.
I can't remember none of them except the last one.
Come on, Dennis.
It was know when to quit. And that one has really stuck through me all through life. Is as a leader, you got to know when to walk away.
Yeah, and several people have reminded me that I'd need to know when to quit.
You have no idea how those profound words become.
People remember them.
Yeah. Well, one of the, again, thank you for coming on. And East Carolina is such a pillar of our community. And one of the things of the Greenville Grit is keeping people informed, too, of what's going on. You guys have come out with this new book, Beyond Tomorrow, A Commitment to the Future. Where can they get a copy of this if anyone ever wants to take a read on what the focus for the university is?
Well, through the Chancellor's office or through my Chief of Staff, Chris Locklear, we'd be happy to send one to anybody who's interested.
Well, it's a great book, and I had the opportunity to serve on the Board of Visitors for East Carolina and learn. It's a great. We only meet once every 3 months, but I love those meetings because we learn about the university. We learn about the challenges that you guys had. We had a huge challenge in the fourth quarter with SODCA.
Correct.
And there was another part of that too.
It's called the Upper Payment Limit,
Limit.
UPL.
That's right, UPL.
It's federal Medicaid payments.
So I know that we
Still
had
working
some
on it.
success in getting some of that back,
Yep.
but we're still missing a few pieces. We're working on there, but
Yep.
I think it's a good opportunity to take the next few minutes and. I want to read the first sentence of this, but it says the mission of East Carolina is to be a national model for student success, public service, and regional transformation. So I think it'd be great. Maybe let's start out with that, and let's talk about student success. Where are we at now? When I was at ECU, I think it was 16, 17,000 students. What is our population now?
It's a little bit over 27,000, 27,500 this year. We'd like to get to 28,000 next year. No guarantees that we'll get there with the economy and other things, but we'd like to grow a little bit. We don't want to be 40,000. That's too big for East Carolina University.
Could it have been 40, but we're controlling the growth? Is that where we are
It is.
now?
I think back in the huge growth years of about 2004 through 2010, if we had not put any limits on growth, that we could be at 35 to 37,000. There was even a Board of Governors study that indicated that we should be at 37,000. But then the recession hit and other things changed. We didn't believe that everybody who applied should come to ECU. We wanted to do more with the community colleges. So we put a little bit of a halt to it, but not a complete halt. We just didn't want to grow in an unlimited fashion.
Well, no,
we wanted to make sure that we served every student. That's the key thing.
And part of that probably also raising the standards of those coming here too.
That's correct, and they've gone up steadily since I've come. Not, we don't envision that we're going to be University of Virginia or University of Wisconsin, but we want to steadily increase our standards, especially the grade point average. High school grade point average is an excellent predictor of student success in college. It's about the only good predictor of whether a student will be successful in college. So we pay a lot of attention to that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the first one, student success. Let's maybe discuss the focus and mission of that and the goals of student success over this time period for this new campaign.
Yeah, I'd like to come back in a few minutes and mention a few things about academic quality, because at the heart of student success is making sure that our academic programs are excellent. And we've had several processes to try to differentiate those programs that are really A+ from the ones that might be a B- or C+. And we're putting our resources primarily into those that make the biggest difference for our students. So a part of this is to evaluate yourself, hold yourself accountable, and then put your resources where that is. That's kind of the 30,000-foot look at student success. But the most important thing about student success, I think, is to energize students and to help them find their passion, and then to make sure that they have the opportunity to do different things. We have just one little example of that is we have a new program it's called University Studies, but it allows those students who have multiple interests to maybe combine their interests. For example, in today's world, there are a lot of jobs related to economics, the environment, and geography. And if you can combine some expertise in those three areas, there are a lot of jobs out there. So we allow students, in some cases with proper oversight, to design their own way, and then we make sure that they get a rounded enough education so that they can graduate.
Wow. I know things change all the time. I guess this would fall in the line of student success, but how do you guys handle which programs you're going to offer, which ones maybe have to be cut? What process does the school go through, and how often does that evaluated?
Really tough question. There are several parts to the answer of that. One is that we work for the Board of Governors and the General Administration, and they have a strategic plan with 5 goals in it. So we pay a lot of attention to those 5 goals. We don't believe we need to be the major university on all 5 of those goals, but we've always said if we're not addressing at least 3 of those goals, we're missing the boat. So we're part of a system, and the system demands that we're mission-driven, and we pay a lot of attention to that. We think that's very important. Our goal is not to be like any other university, but to be true to who we are at East Carolina University. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, we have certain traditions, values, and a history here at East Carolina, and those all make a difference to which programs get the resources and which ones don't. We started as a normal school, which just means that we train teachers. We were once called East Carolina Teacher Training School. For us not to be a teacher training school, we think would be contrary to who we started as and what we do. I actually think, and my friends at Appalachian might disagree with me, but that we are by far the best teacher training school still in North Carolina. So that centrality is what often we refer to it, but who we have been and what we're good at, we don't want to throw those away unless it's absolutely clear that they no longer make sense. So we always want to be a good teacher training school. There are thousands of teachers in eastern North Carolina that came from ECU, and we like that tradition. But then the other thing is we evaluate every program. We had a committee 4 years ago that was called the Program Prioritization Committee, and it evaluated every academic program on whether it was central to our mission, whether it was performing, adequately, and that primarily had to do with student majors and whether they were graduating and those kind of things. And then also whether it was a high quality, whether the faculty were good and the students were getting the kind of jobs or graduate education that they needed. And we put every program in 4 categories on whether they should receive more money or less money, and there's also a category on basically stay the same. But every department then knew that that's where they were. Now they're not locked into that for all time. If they can improve their quality, or if they can change their own mission statement, they can move up in that. But we wanted to let everybody know that in tough economic times, our resources had to go to those programs that were making the biggest difference for our students. So, there are dozens of those, then we're very proud of them. Maybe we can talk about a few, but we didn't have any choice but to do that. We're not nearly as wealthy as some schools to go unnamed today, but we wanted to make sure that our resources were devoted to those programs that make the biggest difference for our students. That's our number one goal.
And you talk about programs like training teachers.
Teacher prep.
But we also are fairly well known for our nursing program, and much recently, fairly new programs, our engineering program. I see that we have a push now to try to get about 1,000 students in that program.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Great question. I'm glad you asked. It's one of my favorite topics. Our engineering program started as a department in 2004. Many people said when we started it we wouldn't be accredited because engineering accreditation is a tough accreditation. They really evaluate you. But we were accredited, I think, in 2006. I have to go back and ask Dean David White if I remember that correctly. And ever since we were accredited, that undergraduate program has grown just wonderfully. We started with just about 50 students. Today we have over 500 engineering students. Our goal is to have over 1,000 engineering students, and here's why. Eastern North Carolina needs our kind of engineers. They're generalists, they're systems engineers. Every one of them gets a job. Most of them stay in North Carolina. They usually have a big choice of jobs. It's one of those programs that's good for the economy and good for the students. We've also added a master's degree in biomedical engineering, which combines our engineering capability with our medical innovation. And we're really quite good in medical innovation. So it's building on strengths, but it's always with the student in mind. So we've been successful enough in engineering, we were able to get that college renamed the College of Engineering and Technology. That took Board of Governors approval. I really thank Board of Governors for doing that. I'll say it wasn't easy. It took a lot of work to get that done. But that's a huge growth factor for us, to bring in more students, but also to respond to the system mission, which is getting jobs for our students, making sure that they're successful after their degree.
Well, you've got the engineering school, but also in the last, you lose track of time. It goes so fast, but in the last several years, really the dental school launched, and where are we at on the dental school right now?
Yeah.
How many graduates? I think was last year the first graduating class?
No, I'll hand out the first diplomas to our dentists this spring, I think on May 9th.
Okay, that's what this is the last one.
The very first class will graduate this May.
Wow.
There's nothing we're more proud of than the dental school because it was hard to get created. We had a lot of opposition to it, but we finally got it created and funded, and it has a very unique mission. There's almost no dental school in the country like ours because our fourth-year dental students, in every other school, they stay on site, which in this case would be in Greenville, but not ours. They go out all across the state and provide dental services to underserved areas.
And how many do we have? 7
clinics?
Clinics?
We will have 8 clinics by next fall. I think, if I remember correctly, 5 are open. A 6th will open in Mitchell County. We'll break the ribbon on that next Friday.
And you've got them literally all over the state.
All over the state. There are 3 in the west, 2 in the south, 3 in the northeast, so they're going to be all over the state. And we're going to do at least 8. We'd like to do 10, but whether the funding is going to be available for that, I'm not quite sure, so we're working on that.
Well, I think it's so important for people to realize it's not just the hands-on training. It's a significant provider for the rural populations.
It's huge.
That normally dentists they live in areas that dentists are not drawn to. They want to live with their families and probably can't make the money that they can make in the larger cities.
Exactly.
So this is a great opportunity.
That's one reason why we only admit North Carolinians to both our dental school and our medical school. And that's very important because when they're from a county in North Carolina, they tend to want to go back close to home rather than maybe move to Chicago or wherever it might be. We've got just a wonderful student whose name I'm forgetting who will get his degree this May that came from Mitchell County. Some people in Mitchell County provided a partial scholarship for him. He's done great, and he has promised everybody that that's exactly where he's going back to. So that's what we want to do. We want to put doctors and dentists back in areas that need them the most.
Well, I think, and that's a good lead-in. We're talking about the rural community, but just talk in a lot of the rural community, it can be and ends up being a Medicaid population, which I know Vidant takes a much larger share of Medicaid, and probably as well as the Brody School of Medicine. I know there's a lot of challenges with the Brody School of Medicine right now, and which is why the UPL and SOTCA was so important to get that put back in in the fall. One of the goals in the book is getting it sustainable. Right. Obviously, the last thing we want is to ever see Chapel Hill come in here, take over our medical school, or even over our hospital. How do we get to that point?
Yeah, I have to answer that by starting by saying that when we first started, there was a commitment from the state to provide most of the funding for our medical school from the state. And that was required because we knew that our doctors were going to go to low population areas, underserved areas. They were going to come from North Carolina. We didn't want them to be saddled with a high debt, so we kept our tuition low. As a matter of fact, there's only one medical school in the Western Hemisphere with a lower tuition than ours, and that's the medical school in the Virgin Islands. So we're a great bargain. That doesn't mean we cut back on quality, but we require state funding in order to meet the unique mission that we have. So now what's happened, and this has happened over 25 years, so I want to be careful to make people know that.
So it's not the last 2 years since there.
It's not the last 2 years.
Long-term
it's not one
thing.
party or another party. It's not one person or another person. It's really 1,000 decisions made over 25 years. But in 1990, 53% of our operating dollars for the medical school came from state appropriations. Today, it's 21%, and probably declining. It's declining because of our inability to collect all the debts that we historically have been able to collect. And that's not sustainable. That's why I'm talking to, yesterday, the Chamber of Commerce, and this morning, a group of business leaders in the community, and I'll be giving over a dozen presentations around the East to make sure that everybody knows that the kind of medical school we have is not like Chapel Hill's or Duke's or anybody else's. It requires state funding for us to serve uninsured patients and Medicaid patients and areas that could not otherwise get medical care. And we're proud of that. We think that's a good thing for North Carolina. But it does require some state help, and we hope the state will allow us, like every other state agency, to collect debts in the future. Last year, that cost us $6.4 million because they removed that 2 years ago. This year, it'll cost us $4 million because they only partially reinstated it, only about a quarter of that debt collection capacity. So every time they do that, it just puts more pressure on our practice plan. Well, our practice plan is family doctors, and they're not the high-income practice plan to speak of. I mean, we have a few, but most of our doctors are family physicians, and a practice plan just can't support a medical school when you have the kind of medical school that we do. So it's a unique funding model. We think it's been extremely successful. The state gave us 3 missions, and all of our data suggests that we've served those 3 missions, but it would be a horrible loss to Eastern North Carolina if we couldn't do that again any longer.
Well, where are we on the track of sustainability right now?
Well, we're making a lot of progress. One piece of progress I want to mention is that we really depend upon our partnership with Vidant Hospital. And with Brian Floyd being the president there, we've never had a better partnership. We're integrating our clinical services so that they're better, but also so that we're not competing against each other. That's been hard to do historically. But in the last 9 months, we've already integrated 2 major clinical services. We're integrating 2 more. And more than that, we're just partners. Brian and I were at the business meeting this morning together talking about our joint needs. He and I are making plans to go to the legislature together. That marriage, that partnership is one of the best public-private partnerships in the state, and that's essential to the sustainability. Right now, it's really working well. We hope everybody in Pitt County can support the direction that Brian Floyd and myself and Rick Nicewander and Phyllis Horns and others, Janet at the Vidant Medical Group is just great. All of those people are helping that. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, we have to have more state appropriations. There's no question about that. The Board of Governors has made a request now for $8 million this year from the state just for the Brody School. They've also requested $2 million for Chapel Hill because we're both part of the system. But that $8 million will be critical. If we get the $8 million and we get the SODCA, then we probably won't run a deficit this year. We're doing other things to try to guarantee that. There's no guarantees anymore, but we think we'll be fine. But it's going to take more money. We estimate that at least $25 million over the next 4 years will be required for the Brody School. But that will only get us back to about a third of the Brody expenses being paid for by the state. Remember I said started out at 53%. It's dropped down to 21%. We've got to get it back to about 35% to have a chance on this.
Well, switch gears just a little bit, but staying in the same lines of the mission. ECU has always been, like you said it before, creative and making sure that mission is critical to the needs of the community. And one area that's near to my heart that you guys have been working extremely good on is the veterans. Starting to work very well in bringing those veteran programs into ECU and trying to get those veterans come here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. I'm not the best expert on that. We've got many others, but we've done many things for our veterans, from educational programs to medical programs. I'm most proud, really, of a couple different programs. I'll mention two, and then if you have any questions, I'll try to address them. But we have a program called Operation Reentry that's funded by the Department of Defense, and the purpose of that is we know that veterans leave the service on a regular basis and have to go back into civilian life and frequently don't have very many helps in doing that, don't have very much support or ways to navigate. It's an entirely different world. The Department of Defense wanted a consortium of universities, which we're part of. We happen to lead the consortium, to provide whatever services are necessary and information, as much as anything, to veterans leaving active military service and going back into civilian life. Sometimes that's job skills. Sometimes it's just how to access educational opportunities. Sometimes it's medical services, because many veterans, of course, come back with wounds or with other illnesses that need to be addressed. So I'm extremely proud of Operation Reentry because it provides services for veterans who have already contributed a monumental amount to our country by keeping us safe. They deserve a good way to come back into civilian life. So that's one thing. Secondly, our Brody School, back to the Brody School, has had two programs, one on post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially Professor Rusinello in the Health and Human Performance area, but also on traumatic brain injury through our neurology group, specifically targeted toward wounded warriors. We have hundreds of soldiers, unfortunately, that come back with either or both of post-traumatic stress disorder, like when they run over a bomb or a mine, or they come back with, they might have a traumatic brain injury as well. These programs have been among the most successful in the country in dealing with those horrible aspects of serving maybe in Afghanistan or Iran. It's very hard, or at least 10 years ago, it was almost impossible to treat those soldiers because the injuries were so new. We hadn't seen those kind of injuries before. But because of Carmen Rusinello and many others at the Brody School, we're providing a great service to the wounded warriors.
Well, thank you. That's great to hear. I mean, and we owe it to the veterans to support them and for what they do for us. I think it's time to take our second commercial break. I know you're going to be running off, but again, I wanted to thank you for coming on.
You're
for
welcome.
Spending the time.
Thank you for asking about our plan. That's been great. We appreciate that.
Well, hopefully, if this thing goes through as you guys are planning it, we'll see East Carolina continue to flourish and continue to become a major asset to Eastern North Carolina. Great. So again, thank you. We're going to take our second commercial break. We'll be back, and Dennis and I will wrap up the show. See you in 2.
This month.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greenville Grit. We just had a amazing discussion with the Chancellor. No time went by fast. We could have talked about hundreds of more things. ECU has a lot of things going on. It's done wonderful things for our community, and it's going to continue to contribute to the growth in our area and job creation efforts we got going on, and we're just blessed to have such an institution like that.
The problem we have, Dennis, is they had 3 pillars. We hit one of them. We were going to try to talk about 3 of them, and we didn't even get to the public service or the regional transformation. But I can talk a little bit about the regional transformation. We mentioned with Dr. Ballard up here, opening all the dental clinics across the state, serving the rural population. I heard numbers. We talk about Medicaid. A lot of people don't realize a lot of doctors' offices don't want to take Medicaid because it's a loss leader for them. They can't get the reimbursements, or Medicaid might only reimburse 25%. I'm just using a number of what the total cost is, and these doctors' offices can't take them, so therefore they can't serve a lot of the population. I've heard that Vidant, and I don't remember what the number was, but I think it was somewhere around 30% of their patients are Medicaid patients, whereas somewhere like Chapel Hill and Duke are in the teens.
Oh, wow.
So it's a significant gap, which means that money's not being reimbursed, which is why we have to have the state funding to help support what they're doing. So it's important for us in this area to make sure and call your state legislatures, make sure legislators and your local politicians. For if you live in the east, it's not just Greenville. If you live in the eastern part of the state, we've got to have a healthy Vidant. We've got to have a healthy Brody School of Medicine, so we can turn these doctors out and continue to recruit new and good doctors to our area. We want them to have a place to live and to be happy here and to have things to do, which is why we talk about things going on in the city and our politicians all the time. But they've got to be sustainable, before they can even come here.
I mean, ECU and Vidant, are really the lifeblood of our area. We didn't get a chance to talk about some of the economic development things that East Carolina University is helping to do. Getting into the clinical trials and their millennial campus and starting to.
I wanted to mention millennial. I completely forgot to mention that.
Doing a lot of the partnerships and things like that.
And a named school of business, they want to get into that. And, and again, they've got some great programs within the business school of trying to reach out in the public and getting the kids involved so they'll understand what the real world's like.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I've got to thank the sponsors, Greenville Toyota, Kidd Construction Group, the Overton Group, and Ribeye Steakhouse. Make sure to visit them all, and we will see you 6:30 Friday night or 9:30 Saturday morning on Cable 7. Until next time, thank you for joining in. Bye-bye.